eventually moving to Facebook was my motivation was I want to work for the best advertising company on the planet in my field and learn from the best and smartest people. And I felt like I was able to do that.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the None Size Fits All podcast, season 2. My name is Jon Boller, co-founder of Grid Consulting. Today I have one of my good buddies on, Joe Keating. Joe and I have known each other for probably about 8 or 9 years. And Joe has a really interesting story with a strong background in tech. Most recently decided to walk away to pursue bigger passions and something a little more meaningful. So welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me, buddy. Yeah. I appreciate it.
So tell me about your day. What'd you do today? Like, what time did you wake up? What'd you do?
So I like to say I spend my time in thirds, and today was actually a really good example of how I've been spending my time since leaving Facebook 2 months ago. And that is, I spend a third of it with my family and just being present and taking care of myself. So as you know, I have 2 young kids, 5 and 7, and just getting to be a part of their daily routine are things that I wouldn't say I've missed over the years, but certainly didn't spend as much time as I would have liked to. Sure. And so now just getting to do a lot of the mundane stuff that I think people take for granted. Making breakfast, okay. Getting the kids dressed, getting them ready for school, dropping them off. Things that seem so uneventful, sure, but actually are some of the most precious moments that you have with your kids. It's just those micro moments. Taking care of myself, started working out a lot more.
Nice. Look good.
Hitting the gym.
Look good.
Look like it. So I spend about a third of my time doing that. The other third of my time is I'm getting closer to 2 nonprofit organizations that, I think are things that are very relevant and are creating impact for our community here in Seattle. That's definitely something that's been something I've wanted to get closer to. So helping out these 2 organizations on a couple of specific projects or things that I'm starting to get very involved in and that have been gracious enough and are eager for my help, sure, especially in the marketing space. And then lastly is trying to figure out what is that next step for me. So there's, on one front, I'm spending some time working on executive coaching. Cool. So companies that we used to work with at Facebook, actually working for them and helping businesses whose staff needs help in communication and presentation skills. Sure. So I'm working with them and then also talking to some startups.
Cool.
On helping those guys. So yeah, it's actually, I fill my time. I think I'm that kind of person. I was nervous and scared that I would just veg out, not have anything. But I have made it a point to make sure that I'm using this gift, which is you and I have talked about this. It's a gift. Yeah. Time is your most precious asset. And so you have control over how to spend it. And so if I'm not spending it in the, I'm using air quotes here, day-to-day 9 to 5, making sure that I'm using the time the way I want to and to learn and give back.
So I'm like picturing you wake up, you put on the apron, and then make like Mickey Mouse pancakes. Like, is this
pancakes are Saturday, John?
Saturday,
that's a weekend
pancakes.
thing.
But this is like real thing. So it's like Daddy's making muffins today.
Yeah. Muffins. I'm not that great at. Catherine's really good at muffins, but I can make really mean pancakes, eggs, bacon, whatever you want, John.
So breakfast.
I'm like a make to order on the weekends.
Okay, so breakfast, and then you go to 24-hour fitness and do some push-ups. And
no, I use a health and fitness app called Gixo.
Okay,
you heard of this? You should check it out. Gixo, and they have live and on-demand training right from your phone.
Okay, so it's on-demand training, but
live and on-demand. So basically, I can, this morning, I pick up my phone, open up the app, and I launch into what's effectively like a high-intensity workout for they have 15, 25, 40-minute intervals.
Okay.
I do it in my living room whenever I want it.
Let's talk about the executive coaching. I once had a coach when I was at Zillow, and like I remember getting offered the opportunity to have an executive coach, and I'd never heard of that. And the kind of the discussion was around like the CEO has a coach and Zuckerberg has a coach. Like everyone has that, but it's a little bit crazy because you think an executive like why do they need a coach? So like speak to that because I think most people don't actually know about this field that's out there of executive coaches.
Executive is defined as any professional. It doesn't, it's not just C-levels or directors. Anybody can improve. This was a company that we worked with at Facebook. And the reason I started talking to them is because I'm sure you or many of your listeners have been a part of trainings before in the workplace. Some are more valuable than others. This one in particular was just something that resonated with me. I felt like it was a non-traditional approach to coaching. The techniques and tips are things that I still follow today, that I'm a big believer of. And I think that they are techniques that anybody can preach or practice and should, regardless of the industry. So I felt like it was an opportunity to do something very interesting that I would not normally get to explore.
Sure.
So one thing led to another, and now I'm starting to do that.
I always thought it was, at least for me, it was more like it was a lot of therapy. It was this moment to have somebody from the outside that has a high level of experience and help me get through decisions that I otherwise wouldn't get from a boss that's working on the same type of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's one type of coaching. So I should clarify. The type of coaching that I'm getting more involved in is helping with communication techniques, presentation skills, use of language, whether you're talking to a big audience or a small audience. It's things like that I find very practical but impactful.
Sure.
I have taken career coaching, situational coaching. That is also helpful, but I think a little bit different.
Sure. So let's go to your career. When I moved to Seattle, you were at Razorfish.
Yep.
It's an ad agency. Walk us through your career progression for the past 10 years.
Sure.
First off, you moved from Boston.
Yeah, I moved from Boston.
You're a Boston fan?
Go Sox.
Go Sox?
Go Pats.
What about Celtics?
Go Celtics.
Okay.
We got a lot of good.
I'm wearing a Knicks jersey today. That was actually just for you.
Just to piss me off while I get to look at you.
I'm sorry. This was like, I'm going to wear a Knicks jersey.
I mean, that's fine. I'm happy with how the Celtics season is going to shape up.
We'll see. Listeners, last year we went and watched the first game of the season. So Boston versus, was it the Cats?
Mm-hmm.
And we got to, Joe literally wasn't at the restaurant yet, and Gordon Hayward broke his leg, and then he walked in.
5 minutes before I walked in.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was a good night.
All right, so
anyways, we're moving on.
Yes,
good season ahead.
Good luck.
Excited about Tuesday.
Watch out for the big unicorn.
Not worried about that.
All right.
So you had asked, I moved to Seattle in 2005 from Boston, which in and of itself was a big deal for me.
Why?
I grew up in Boston. I went to school in Boston. My family's from there. I sort of always expected I would just settle there. That's what people in Boston do. And I had this desire for more and to try something completely different. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, fortunately agreed to come with me.
Wow.
And we really just decided let's move out to the West Coast. What are the cities on the West Coast that would be interesting? Ended up here in Seattle, fortunately, and we've been here ever since. And I also don't think I would move again. I really, really love it out here and have started to raise a family. So that was a big life change for me. And I had started working at Razorfish. Razorfish is an advertising agency. It was called Avenue A at the time. It was actually one of the first online advertising agencies. So back before even the internet, from a monetization and advertising perspective, was a tenth of what it is today, it was still a specialty shop. And Avenue A was one of the first companies that was started to specifically service that at an advanced level, which was very different at the time from an agency perspective. And so I had the good fortune of working there for 6 years, all within the media space. So what that media means, I was helping businesses buy advertising across the internet in all capacities. Yeah. And that was really rewarding. I mean, it was fun because I was in my early 20s at the time, and that was something that was fast-paced. I was learning a ton.
Sure.
Then the great part of being at a company like that is you get to see what's happening in the marketplace, so you're not super specialized. You're meeting with all different companies. AOL and Yahoo are coming in, and Microsoft and Facebook, when Facebook started, is coming in and saying, hey, we got this social network that's gaining some traction. We're thinking of running some ads on it. Would your client be interested? Very, very early days in a lot of these companies. And when you're sitting in a position at an agency, especially at the time, what's great is you get to see that whole perspective.
Sure.
And you see it all coming in, and you can kind of see trends and where things are going.
Yeah.
So I thought it was just such a great learning experience. I always tell people if you're starting out, it's just an agency is such a great place. It's a great place to be if you're in your early 20s and you want to learn about what's happening in the market, just because you get so much exposure to it. And also you get a lot of responsibility at a fairly young age. So you're making an impact for different companies in really early on in your career.
What was it? So Facebook, like, what was it like in the early days? I mean, that would have been
from an advertising perspective.
Yeah, like what did you see?
Well, this was
obviously so different now.
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, aside from the obvious things, the ad placements and what you were doing, I think the biggest difference that still frustrates a lot of companies today is back then the metric or the KPI that was most important to businesses or with Facebook and social networking in general was about likes and fans. I don't know if you remember any of this.
Sure.
And as sellers, they would be talking to us about increasing your clients' like count.
Yeah.
I want to get more followers or fans to the Nike page.
Yeah.
And that was something that you actually talked a lot about and spent a lot of energy doing and figuring out and analyzing. Fast forward to today, where that is almost non-existent. It's not important at all.
What are the metrics now?
Well, now is about the business has matured in the right place where it's about business objectives and business goals. So you're never walking into a discussion about likes. You're walking into a discussion on what's sales.
Sure.
Average value order, return on ad spend, new signups, trials, or brand KPIs, brand awareness, switching brand perception. So it's become much more about the right things that businesses should care about, and those are ultimately what drives their bottom line.
So that you obviously see this a lot, and there's a lot of third-party sellers of this. They basically are agencies that help people generate leads via Facebook. And what does the back-end analytics look like from Facebook's end? Like, what are you providing to the people spending the money when they're buying leads on Facebook?
Yeah, so for today when businesses are generating leads, the nice part is you get a lot of data about how that investment is working for you. So whether it's the just raw volume of leads that you're getting, if you are tracking order value, that's something that you can see, and you can see also the different types of people that are responding to that, which I think is the value. A lot of the companies today that are generating leads, it's their data, right? They're seeing that. It's not Facebook telling them. There's an interface for anybody to go in and see that. I think what the value that places like Facebook bring now is you're able to tell businesses a little bit more about, who those customers are, who those leads are, where they're kind of coming from, just to help them get a little bit smarter. But all of those analytics are on the back end that businesses can analyze for themselves.
Nice. Okay, so what do you think with Facebook? Like, it shifted from likes to get that shot of excitement because people liked your thing, and now there's all these bots and all these fake accounts out there that are liking people on Instagram and Facebook. The model then shifted to leads, like a lot of industries. Like, where would you say they're at on a pricing perspective? Like the cost per lead, and what is the runway? There's obviously Facebook talks about ad load capacity. Okay, like when that's gone, it means I can't have any more ads. But then the next thing that's going to potentially go up is pricing on leads. So what do you think the runway is for Facebook and lead gen?
So I think it's different for every business. We always would say, the auction works where it's designed to basically tell it what you want and what you value as your consumer. So if you're willing to pay X for a customer, then that's what you're telling the auction to do. And the auction will find people at that value. I think what people often forget, we used to take this for granted sometimes too, is the size of Facebook and Instagram and Messenger is so significant. Hundreds of millions of people in the United States that use it every single day. You can't find that kind of scale in a lot of places with the sophistication that entire ad ecosystem delivers to businesses. And so I bring that up because, there will eventually be a ceiling, or I would say a slight dwindling of supply in feed. But it's such a sophisticated auction and delivered to hundreds of millions of people that you can still find efficient conversions at scale across all of those platforms. And I think what you've seen, Facebook now being removed from it I think are spending a lot of time focused on is it's not just about the Facebook newsfeed that it used to be about driving leads. There's, this whole platform called Instagram that in and of itself could be an enormous business. And even within Instagram, you're seeing two distinct behaviors between people in newsfeed and then the behavior of stories and ephemeral messaging. And I think that presents a whole different opportunity for how you talk to people, but from a business standpoint, how you can increase and drive conversions. Yeah. And all of those, especially those newer spaces like stories, are where there's a ton of white space. Yeah. And still very, very efficient pricing available.
What I'm fascinated with Facebook is, one, I think the pricing is super cheap. It's just incredibly cheap. The conversion isn't always as good, but people are there to check on their sphere, or they're to communicate with people or whatever, see photos and all that stuff. But when I think about the pricing, just do the math. It's cheap. It's very, very cheap. And so if you can use technology or systems to basically do some of the vetting for you, then I think that's just a good ROI play. Yeah. But the part I'm also fascinated with Facebook is these different levers that they are not even really monetizing yet. And so Facebook, you have the pricing power. Instagram, obviously, I think is going to be a huge cash cow for a long time. Then you have WhatsApp, which still is not monetized, and I think that is just going to print money. Sure. And then now Facebook Watch, and then also Messenger. Yeah. So how do you think about it long term? Because they get beat up about these different things, but I'm sitting there looking at all those levers with all those eyeballs, and there's got to be just tremendous excitement if you're at Facebook or if you used to work there as it relates to upside.
Yeah, I mean speaking personally, I never lost faith in the long-term vision. Mm-hmm. I am still I'm a stockholder. I have not sold any shares despite what the press reports as the downfall of Facebook and a lot of the beatings that they've taken. I fundamentally and wholeheartedly believe in in their long-term vision. And I think because of what you said, there's such a powerful portfolio of platforms that have different use cases too. Messaging is a different behavior than feed. But I think what we always used to talk about, if you go back to translating this all to business value, is at the forefront is people, people, real identity that are passionate users of these platforms every single day. They have it on the device, I'm holding up my phone, that they carry with them to bed, the most personal device that you have anywhere, and are the apps on that device that you use most frequently. I think having the privilege of that trust with people is invaluable. And it's what unlocks the business opportunity for so many people that are trying to reach customers in places that really matter to them. And I think when you look at the different canvases that are available, there's a ton of opportunity. We used to spend a lot of time talking with businesses just around, once you've grasped that, now fundamentally, how do you start to do that? How do you talk to somebody in a messaging environment that's different from Instagram, that's different from Facebook? And there's all nuances to that.
So basically, it's the early innings of Facebook, but what is scary is all of those new emerging places that have a lot of, WhatsApp. That was an amazing acquisition, and I think they're just now going to start monetizing it or testing monetization. Yeah,
in some markets globally, I think it's not so much. I don't think it's early days for Facebook. I used to think of it. I think it's early days for certain types of communication.
Got it.
I think it's not necessarily. It's not really early. I wouldn't even use the early days is a bad example. But Stories was the fastest growing consumer product at Facebook.
Really?
And just that behavior of real fast ephemeral messaging that people share with one another is
stories on Instagram, not the ones on, because the stories on Facebook. I've never really.
Sure. Instagram is definitely the predominant platform for that, but Facebook too. But I think we used to talk about it more as just the behavior of those platforms, not so much like Facebook versus Instagram versus Messenger, but messaging versus kind of, I guess, ephemeral story-like consumption and then feed.
You said something about having your phone in bed, and every day I walk into the office and I feel as though the phone is creating zombies out of people, because in downtown Seattle, I literally walking and head is completely down, staring at a phone, and you think about, I was relate walking on a sidewalk in a busy city to driving a car.
Yeah.
You don't just go and stand in the middle of the road, just as you wouldn't just park your car in the middle of a highway and have your head down.
Yeah.
Because you're it's not good, right? The right of way and all this stuff. And I'm thinking about it, it's I wonder how much of that is it the phone, or is it social media? Is it when that person is walking with their head down and they run into you, are they on Instagram, Facebook, or is it just I don't know. Do you walk with your head down and read the news?
I do sometimes. I think Instagram and Facebook get they take the brunt of that, and you could argue, just given where time spent shakes up, that's probably proportionate. Yeah. If you're taking up 25% of everyone's time on a mobile device, that's probably contributing.
25%?
Yeah, about 25%.
So for 25% of the time when I'm on my phone, I'm on Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah.
Wow. That's bonkers.
So, it's a lot. It's a lot of time. But speaking from a parent that has children, we consciously limit our kids' screen time, because you can see the effect it has on them.
Zombies?
Yeah.
Little kid zombies?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of harm to that, personally. And I think it's just like anything in moderation.
Okay. So you're at Razorfish, then you went, we got off track a little bit. We started having this geek out conversation about Facebook. We're going to get back to that.
I like doing that. I like talking about this stuff.
So Razorfish, ad agency, learning about all these emerging technologies and big companies. Then you go to a big company, Microsoft.
Yeah.
So Microsoft, Skype, Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Like what? Well, I guess let's hear about Microsoft going from digital agency to working for one of the biggest companies in Seattle.
Yeah, I was really drawn to, when you're working at an agency, like I mentioned, you're exposed to all these different companies.
Yep.
I knew I wanted to stay in Seattle, and I kind of wanted to see what the other side of the table looked like. So the people who were thinking about those solutions or were working on the product side, I wanted to see what that was like. And there was an opportunity that came to me working at Microsoft in what ended up being a great transitional role from kind of working in a media agency space to a big company like Microsoft. And it was working across products, all in the advertising sphere. So Xbox, MSN, Skype, Windows 8, they were all these surfaces that Microsoft was monetizing through advertising. And the group that I started working with had just formed, and we were tasked with helping marketers develop programs that had multiple components across those products. Because at Microsoft, it's unique. It's a huge company that almost has, a couple $1 billion companies inside of it.
Yeah.
And if you're as a marketer at a company that's trying to create an advertising program to reach people that use those devices and services, it can be challenging. And so we were created to sort of help make that more of a cohesive process.
I would assume having access, like for instance on Facebook, you'd have it's nice when you advertise and you have Facebook and Instagram, they're just merged. It's all like a part of the same ecosystem.
Yeah.
At Microsoft, you didn't expect that wasn't the case.
Certain things were integrated. I mean, this is a little too tactical, but there's ad systems that were integrated for the most part. But there were teams that were very different. I mean, Skype functioned as almost a completely separate entity from the get-go. It wasn't integrated the way it is today. Xbox had its kind of own thing. MSN had its own thing. So it was a little bit disjointed. Again, if you're thinking of it from the advertiser lens.
Yeah.
So how can I help you if you're trying to talk to people? You want to reach people who are reading articles on MSN, or people who are playing games on Xbox, or people who are chatting with their family on Skype. You would have to have multiple conversations. So our group was just kind of helped facilitate that. But I think what I took away the most from Microsoft, and I include Skype in this, was a lot of rigor around management.
Okay.
And how to be a good manager, how to develop your teams, how to play off strengths, how to give feedback. It was the first time that I went from just, okay, I'm a high performer that's just got some people reporting into me, to I'm a manager at a company, and that's job number one. And here's how you actually do that.
Sure.
Your job number one is to support your people, and your people's success is your success. That was when it first really dawned on me.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for that experience, because one of the great parts of Microsoft is they actually invest in their managers and training and helping you kind of grow into that role. And that was just an invaluable lesson for me.
Training on leadership and development, I've witnessed it. I'm curious what they do at a big company to actually make it a really worthwhile experience, because there's some of the leadership and development where you're just like, okay, like people are going through the motions of this thing, or I'm being taught to care, or like have a heart, listen to your people, have one-on-ones. I don't feel as though that's something that if I'm having to teach one of my leaders to care or to have one-on-ones, they probably aren't the right person for the role.
Yeah.
So how do they do it at a big corporation like that so that it is meaningful and useful versus just regimented, and now I'm like, oh crap, I have to go to this leadership and development training?
Yeah. Well, there's two things that stick out. The first is, the most direct, is it's part of your evaluation, your performance evaluation.
Okay.
So what does your team think of you?
Yeah.
And there are both, quantitative and qualitative measures against that.
Yeah.
Literally scores of how you are as a manager, and then just feedback from your team. And so from a very black and white perspective, that's that's part of what determines whether you're strong or not. The second part is just the training and support. I kind of go back to this where I'm spending a lot of time with executive coaching. There was coaching very specific to managers, whether it was situational things that you might come up with. They have a dedicated training curriculum that is both for all employees, but custom tailored courses for managers as well. And Facebook does that as well. And I think any good company that wants to invest in their leaders, which in turn helps really the company as a whole, invest in those types of things and teaches you and helps you in those situational areas. So I felt like those were two things that stood out to me as, one, I'm being graded on this, and two, there's help in how to do this. So
you bring up training. I always love training, because training to me is like the closest form in the business world of being a teacher, education. And my philosophy on sales was always like a good salesperson is actually a great educator. They're educating people on the product, they're educating them on the goods or the bads, and they're letting them make an informed decision at that point versus fear of missing out, like overselling and stuff like that.
Sure.
What makes good training? Like, what is it? Is it having everything written down and having good SOPs? Is it an engaging trainer? What are the key ingredients to make it? So, and here's what I'm thinking of: is I do a lot in real estate. So, new real estate agent comes to my team. Do I give them a blueprint? And is the blueprint specific and directive and it's written down, or is it, hey Joe, when I want to learn something, I have to call you or text you, and you're just going to on the fly give me this type of training? Like, what is it in big America, big corporate America? What does good training look like?
The short answer I have for that is it actually depends on the audience. One of the things that we're talking about now with this company that I find resonates is, if you're coaching somebody or even if you're presenting, it's not about you. It's always about your audience, or it's about your team. So the answer to that is however they learn best.
Sure.
That said, I've sat in trainings that are blueprint, directive,
sure,
here's what you should do. I've sat in trainings that are much more of a conversation. Let's talk about a situation. What are some of the right things and wrong things to do? And at that point, I think it's just a personal preference of what is the audience? How do they learn best? It's like, think back to school and college. There's students that learn better with visuals and lectures. There's other kids who just want to go straight and read a textbook. Everyone is different, and I find that style is what has to come across. I've also found, now that I'm spending more time doing direct executive coaching with people, that there is a style that I find to be more compelling and lands with people more, that is a little bit more free form and not this is black and white, this is the truth, because the reality is there aren't many black and white answers. There are different ways to do things, and if you're hearing stories from how certain people have handled it, that can be equally impactful. So.
I always felt in the training environment, having both is what a good training program would have, so that I can check both boxes. Right? Yeah. And so I think about when I was in California or in Seattle, when I would do the kind of last training session with my team, I always had visuals, but then I would deliver it in a way that was interesting, and I'd like to believe it was fun.
Yeah.
But it was like, by doing both, I was able to connect with them in one of the capacities.
Sure.
Some people don't make eye contact and they just are reading. Others are really getting excited about the hand movement, the gestures, and the excitement, and the inflection of my voice.
Again, everyone learns a little bit differently. We always say it too right now is, I could tell you everything, but it's, especially when it comes to training, it's up to the student to A, want to be there, and 2, want to improve and do something with it. If those aren't there, like I could have the most glorious presentation with the best data in the world, and it's going to fall flat for you.
I would imagine at Microsoft and Facebook, the trainer then has KPIs that they're tracked against. To like the success of the people under their umbrella.
Yeah, sure, definitely. The feedback that you get from teams immediately after, there are also quantitative scorecards, and then I think what oftentimes is the most compelling is the tenure of those companies within Microsoft and Facebook. Okay. So a lot of, at that size, you're working with third parties to actually bring in different customized training curriculums for your teams or departments. And I feel like the tenure of how long those companies and curriculums stick around are really what differentiates. Facebook's been amazing in just kind of working with these teams to develop a series of really strong trainings, especially for salespeople, that have stuck around for years, are very tailored and relevant for what people are going through at the time. That spans a number of different parts of the job that I always appreciated.
Sure. So you were sales at all these companies. How are you measured as it relates to the satisfaction of your clients? Obviously, like in most sales organizations, there's like the line items about revenue, right?
Yeah.
But how are you measured as it relates to like your people being happy with you? Is it every phone call? Is it a quarterly check-in? Is it a CSAT like rating, or what is it?
We do have quantitative. Almost all big sales organizations will have quantitative measures from clients, which is basically just a survey out to clients asking them a bunch of questions on how's the company doing. That is one input that most organizations look at. Personally, I didn't as much, just for a number of reasons, based on whether people respond to those or not. The more telling is in qualitative feedback in meetings. Really just I would ask my clients a lot directly. What are we doing well? What aren't we? Almost in every meeting, there's something that we talk about now in coaching a lot, which is great leaders demand feedback. Good leaders might say like, "Hey, John, how did this go? Look, just give me a call whenever you want. Let me know how things went." The reality is you'll never call me. Yeah. Or come into my office. My door's always open. Sure. Let me know. Give me feedback whenever. No one will ever do that. Oh. And so one of the things that we try and instill, and I saw this at Facebook and to a lesser degree, but was still there at Microsoft, is demanding for feedback all the time. What did I do well? Where could I improve? It's weird at first, and it's unnatural for some people, but the fourth or fifth time, two things happen. One, you get really comfortable with it. Yeah. And two, the people that you're asking get really comfortable with it. It's really effective with your teams. Sure. Because then it becomes part of the culture, and it's not this weird thing, and it's all in service of everyone getting better, because everyone can get better at something, and it becomes the norm. Yeah. So that was something that we would always preach.
I used to, when I would do any presentation or one-on-one or any meeting, and I'll do it after this podcast, I asked the team, like, what were your takeaways? What was good? What was bad? And I never actually felt like it was awkward, because everyone, I would assume, expected me to ask that question. Yeah. I'm learning a lot from the feedback, but I also want to know what were like the things that were hard hitting. Yeah. And I can learn every single time. Yeah. And I want to make sure that people are engaged. Otherwise, I didn't do a very good job presenting.
And I would say, we always say, I'll give you some feedback here, John. Always keep it positive. Yeah. So what did I do well? And then not what did I do bad or what sucked, but what could I have done better? Sure. What would make this better the next time? Sure. Because it's always in the positive. I think that's what people get afraid of giving feedback, is it's constructive and it can get negative, and you hear too much and people start to contract. So we always keep it positive, and I've always subscribed to at least 3 pieces of positive feedback to one area to improve.
Nice. You were doing a bunch of sales, and then we were at a guy's golf trip that we do. Yeah. I had a really bad year. It was a bad year.
You did.
It was a really bad year this year for me. But I remember walking up to the tee box, and it was like, Keating quit. It was like, wait, what? He has a good job, and he quit, and it was like, okay, now he's out playing golf, and I'm like, yes, this is gonna be a really fun weekend. I guess first off, when was it? Was it?
I left 2 months ago.
2 months ago,
end of August.
Decided to quit, and I know like a lot of people go through this, where you're in this moment, You have stability.
Yeah.
I guess before me saying it, I just want to hear you. Like, what was the psychology of leading up to quitting? How was it like before and then right afterwards, and where you're at now, like in your headspace? I think a lot of people struggle with this thing, so it's always good to hear about your own journey and through your mind.
Sure. I think there are different motivators for why people do what they do. Mm-hmm. It can be financial. I'm going to make the most money doing this thing. It could be a job title. This gives me notoriety. It could be a great work-life condition. This is like right down the street. I can walk to work. Life's easy. None of those are wrong.
No.
There isn't a right or wrong motivator.
It's right, because all three of those are the things that lots of my friends say,
including me.
Yeah, like everyone.
Yes. And along my career, those different motivators drove me to each step. Mm-hmm. The first, as I described, was a geographic motivator. I want to move to the West Coast. It wasn't really a professional motivation. The second was I want to see a different side of this professional experience. Eventually moving to Facebook my motivation was I want to work for the best advertising company on the planet in my field and learn from the best and smartest people. And I felt like I was able to do that. So there was an intellectual motivation. After being there for 3.5 years, I used the analogy, like, you ever pour bacon grease down your drain?
It's not good.
Not a good thing.
Not supposed to.
You pour bacon grease down the drain, 10 times, you're not going to notice anything. But what's happening is the grease is starting to congeal and clog up and clog up and clog up. And eventually on the 11th time, nothing's going down.
Yeah.
That is how I would describe the lead up to my decision to leave Facebook. It wasn't this one moment where I said to myself, I'm done with this place, or I'm even unhappy or unsatisfied. Mm-hmm. I think that when I've talked to a lot of friends about this, it's the most unexpected answer that I give to them, because I think people often associate you're leaving a job with you're unhappy or something happened. And for me, it was the motivator that was lacking at that time for me was purpose and meaningful purpose. And what that means to me is I felt like what I was doing was intellectually stimulating, for sure, was supporting my family. I was working with great people. I had a wonderful management system. But I got to a point where I was like, I don't know if this is the most meaningful work that I could be doing. I don't know if I'm helping people in a way that I feel like I could. Maybe I could use these skills in other areas. Maybe I should go check that out. And that the grease analogy, that was like over a year time. It wasn't
a year kind of in your head, like, should I or should I not?
Yeah, that first sort of pouring the grease down the drain was about a year ago. And there were little moments over the time where those thoughts kind of build and you test them out. You figure, is this right? And I finally got to a point where what makes it harder for me was I didn't have that bad experience where I needed to get kicked out or something bad was happening. I need to leave. What was it? That actually could be easier, because then you have a finite point to say, look, I can leave. This was like, am I really gonna do this? And I got to a point, at least for me, where if I didn't pull the trigger and take a break and pull myself out, I'd still be doing it and kind of it running in the motions. And so, I decided to talk to my family and talk to the team. I'd been talking with my manager and a couple of other folks at Facebook for a while too, and letting them know this was what I was thinking. And everyone was really supportive. And I got to a point where I thought, I'm going to take some time off. And that's what I've been doing.
It's awesome. This is like one of my favorite topics, because I myself struggled with the decision when I quit my job. There's this interesting, I just think of courage. There's courage, not like there's no negative thing that happened, but it is, you're constantly in a state in your head. You're probably like thinking about it way too much. But getting the courage specifically to walk away from the pay or from the stability or the title or the I've been doing this every day for X number of months in a row and it's what I know.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, what was it for you? Was there a moment where you finally had the courage where you like just got done watching the Celtics play and you're like, okay, now I'm going to do it?
I won't say a moment, but I would say there were themes that replayed over in my mind that became forcing functions. The first was, this will sound morbid, but there were some colleagues of mine that I had worked with at Microsoft that passed away in the last year. And that hit home because these were people I used to work with on a fairly regular basis. And you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk too, as do I. And he always has this funny sentence where he talks to people and he says, "You're going to die. You just have to come to grips with that."
Yeah.
And that what has resonated with me in that statement, not to get overly morbid, is you only get one life. So hanging around to figure something out because of things that you're not really passionate about, it's not worth it.
Sure.
We're all going to die at some point, and so you better make the most of it. The second theme was, going back to my kids, is I would put my kids in my situation. If my son or daughter is having the same emotions, what advice would I give them in their late 30s? And I was hoping that they would do what I did. And I thought, if that's the advice I would give to them, why shouldn't I give it to myself? So those were just two themes that kept coming up as this is a risk that's worth taking.
So it's interesting. Whenever I think of this section, I think of Jeff Bezos' quote. He's like, I make decisions based on whether or not I'm going to potentially regret it. Mm-hmm. And if I'm going to potentially regret it, I always run forward and do it. For myself, it was always, I don't want to be sitting like on the porch having a cup of coffee and say, damn, I wish I would have started a company. Like I could have just sat there and did my job and made good money. But like, I would have been the guy sitting there saying like, I could have.
Yeah.
But you didn't. So it doesn't matter. And none of these companies ever would be here if there weren't people that quit and go for it.
Yeah, totally. And I think what you also have, you and I have talked about this, about what you're doing, is, and I believe this too, is I felt like there's a level of confidence too in what we have ourselves. I felt like the worst case scenario for me is in a few months I go back to doing a similar thing with completely different perspective.
Yep.
I'm confident in my skills and abilities. I have no reason to doubt that. Everything's going to be okay. And I think I've been telling people who are considering or thinking about the same thing, remember that.
Yeah.
The world doesn't fall apart. You're successful in what you're doing today for a reason. Mm-hmm. Keep that confidence with you, because that doesn't go away.
Sure.
If anything, it's going to grow because of this.
The mental learnings after quitting, I think are so like I'm learning now more than ever about stuff I never would have had a chance to learn about.
Yeah.
Like whether it's the paperwork or the documents or lawyers or fundraising, like all this stuff is new. Which inspires me. It's a very different world, but I was in Vietnam. I was like going through all the tunnels, and our guide was talking about like how he's Buddhist, and he's like, I believe that everything will be okay. And so he would say to us, take it easy, buddy. And it's like the whole thing of Gary saying you're going to die. Mm-hmm. It's also going to be okay. Yeah. Especially if you believe in your skill set and you're capable and you work hard and you're passionate, you will be perfectly fine. Yeah. Why do you think people struggle so hard with the decision to finally actually pull the trigger, though? Because how many people do you know over the years, whether at Microsoft or Facebook or whatever, that like for 6 months they kept pouring it down the drain?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think and I struggle with this too. It's not easy. Is all of the reasons not to are just it's the other side of your shoulder. Mm-hmm. There's money. There's health insurance. There's how are you going to spend your time? There's the unknown. Yeah. There's all these there's kids. What are you doing? I definitely had that devil's advocate that is always on my shoulder with those doubts. And they're not you have to listen to them. They're not unreasonable. They're there for a reason. That's what's tough. You either make that decision or not.
So if you could tell yourself, you go back and talk to Joe a year ago when you poured the grease down for the first time, what would your advice be?
Probably everything's going to be okay. Don't stress too much over the last year
or the next year. I mean, but would you have done it all the same?
It's hard for me to answer that now. There's things I've even learned in the last 2 months that I think I would apply or would change my perspective from a year ago, maybe. I don't know if I would do anything fundamentally different, but it's been fascinating. I'm glad I'm spending the time in these other areas because I'm seeing the needs and gaps that are out there in certain places that I'm trying to explore. And there's a lot of areas that I could easily leverage, me a year ago for. So they're just things like that. But I don't really, I don't regret anything. I haven't played back too many things of, I would have done this, I should have done that. I'm really happy where I'm at. I'm excited about the unknown and the future. I have nothing but a really positive outlook about it.
So what's next? What does the next 6 months look like?
I'm going to keep spending. So I'm really 2 months into how I'm spending my time, as I talked about in those thirds, and I'm going to keep doing that. That's been a good structure for me. It's giving me the mental space to focus on the things that I want, and it's also given me time to make sure that those things are maturing where I want them to and feel like I'm getting something out of each of those areas. Nice. So I still want to be present with my family. I still want to see through a couple of these projects that I'm working on with nonprofits and then figure out what happens with this, the next phase of what I do.
Everything will be okay.
Yeah. I'm totally excited about that.
And we all will die. All right, so we're gonna wrap it up. Joe, I went the whole episode without calling you your nickname, Big Dog.
Thanks,
Keating. Thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me, bud. This is fun.
Yeah, I love doing this. It's really fun. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.